Okay, so we are on production and underconsumption. You should have kind of this knowledge already kind of floating around. There's been a lot of talk about how once World War One ended, there was a spending spree that took place here in the United States, but there was also a pretty quick stoppage of need for American goods in other parts of the world, particularly where World War One, with countries that were involved in World War One. Tariffs made that even worse. So we've talked a little bit already about where this overproduction and underconsumption came from. But now let's talk about kind of how it put us onto that downward spiral. So some of the background information for overproduction of goods is the ending of World War One. During the war, we had countries who relied on the United States for food product, military goods, all the things they were really not able to produce because they were entangled in a war on their land. So people weren't able to just like show up at the factory and build things because war was happening. Also, you got to consider that millions and millions of young, able bodied men between the ages of probably even as low as 16, but really 18 to in their 30s were entangled in the war efforts for these European allied nations. So they weren't able to work in the factories, even if it was safe to do so. And when the war ended, they're strapped for cash as a country and as individuals. So even though we were producing a ton of new and amazing and awesome goods here in the United States, they didn't have, as people or as a country, the ability to buy things. And as the United States progressed through the 1920s, that started happening here as well. So right away when the war ended, a lot of Americans were like, spend, spend, spend. They made so much money during the war as a family. Both of them, both spouses generally had a job. That was the first time really ever that you'd have a income family. Minority groups, including women, were making more money than ever before as well because they were entering into positions that our doughboys, which are soldiers, had filled before. So there was a lot of money to be had, and technologies as well allowed for things to be created faster, which I've talked a little bit about with the trickle down economic plan, how companies like Ford were using those tax rebates and just their massive amounts of income to really replace people with machines. And so that led to a lot of layoffs, but first it also led to products being made quicker and cheaper. So those who were still retaining a job in early 1920s were able to buy things that maybe they had never been able to do before because they were cheaper than before. So we had some production. We didn't have companies kind of, let me just like kind of sum that up. Our companies didn't adjust quickly enough for the reduction of demand. And then when they did start to do that, I want you to look at the spiral on the board or on your piece of paper, that once we have less production, that is going to lead to less jobs. So people are going to first get replaced with machines, and then later on in the 1920s, just get let go because we don't need as many products because people aren't buying as much. And some other things that took place during the 1920s were purchasing things on credit. Actually, let me here's just a little bit on advertisement so that you can see the excitement of things to go. And one of these advertisement here, if you look on the typewriter one, it says $3 down and it's yours. This is the first time ever that we have credit. Okay, so people were buying on credit. So I'm on cause number 2 now on your guys' sheet. Credit wasn't like it is today where it's done on a credit card. You know, you might have a Visa, Capital One or whatnot. And so your credit is from the company of Capital One, but you might go to Sears, doesn't exist anymore, Macy's, Safeway, whatever, and use that credit card there. And in order to get that credit card, you have to go through kind of a background check of your history, if you will, and they'll determine whether you are fit enough to receive credit, and if so, what is your credit limit? That doesn't exist yet. And these credits happened to be usually with the store. So you'd go into whatever store, let's say a Macy's, a Sears, if you guys even have ever heard of a Sears, and you get credit directly from them. So they might have the Hoover vacuum and you can't afford it outright because $38.95 is maybe a little bit much for you. Like, well, let's, purchase it on credit. Today, if you were to go get your econ class, you're going to hear about it. If you're in personal finance, just kind of be a little bit educated on what could happen if you take out too much credit. We have a lot of educational courses on it. We have a lot of attempt to be protection about people getting credit. This is brand new. So nobody knew these kind of long-term consequences. Additionally, in the early 1920s, it looked like we were just going to continue to thrive as a nation. There was no downward spiral. So some people were overextending themselves on credit. And if you've ever done that, it sucks. But it really limits your ability to buy things. So early 1920s, you're getting the Hoover, you're getting the typewriter, maybe a dishwasher, refrigerator, whatnot, and you're doing well. And then the bills start coming. And you're like, oh, shoot. I'm sitting down doing my monthly budget, and all my spending money now is going to pay for the credit on these items I got. So now you're producing less demand for new goods. Your monthly, bills are now going to pay for these products. If you continue to retain your job, it's not too bad. You're going to get out of it. No big deal. Can't get that new Model T in red like you were hoping to, but eventually it's going to swing around. But what happens if you lose your job? You're potentially going to stop paying these things you owe on credit. So now we have, I'll go with Macy. Well, let's go Sears because it was around at the time. Sears is not getting your credit payments. You're defaulting on it. They can go and repo your Hoover vacuum, but that's not going to really do much for them. So the companies are starting to get hurt by so many people with credit who now maybe aren't able to pay off their credit. Also, what you might be doing is going to the bank to pull money out of your savings to pay for that credit. And we talked about that the other day about what that impact that had on the banks. So the question here to kind of toy around with is, what role does advertisement play in what you purchase and want? How much does seeing others with these new products impact your desires? And that speaks a little bit to the 1920s and this saying called keeping up with the Joneses. It is, you see your neighbor with the newest thing, and maybe it's a barbecue, a new Tesla, if you're thinking 2023, and you want it then. The new cell phone comes out and you're seeing more and more of your friends with it. So you want to go and get it. And you know what Apple allows you to do? Pay for that phone on credit. So now each month when you pay your cell phone bill, a portion of that is you slowly paying off your cell phone because they cost like $1,000 and people just don't want to, throw that down right away. But you got to get approved for that in order to happen. Back then, not so much. And so when you have a number of people who are defaulting on their credit, it hurts you as an individual, hurts the company, it's going to hurt the bank. So you got this downward spiral and people are just going to stop really purchasing as much as well. All right. So brand new concept, you would see it in the Ford. Here's, an advertisement for that. Buy today, pay later, select what you need, arrange convenient terms, and enjoy immediate delivery. This is for Firestone, if you can see down the bottom. So tires and cars and things of that nature. And because of technology, these things were cheaper than they had been before. And so it seems affordable. It's just you don't kind of, if you go crazy in 1 month before you start getting the bills, you may not kind of budget out properly. And again, if you lose your job, ooh, that's going to be bad. And kind of the last of this is you should also kind of maybe been gathering this knowledge a little bit. So connecting some dots here is in the 1920s, we saw this huge spectrum of huge gap, between the rich and the poor. The rich were just becoming richer. This is because of things like the trickle down economic plan and how it happened to just immensely help the upper class because maybe they're the business owners. Their company has now transitioned to be machinery. And so they're holding that money. They're making a lot of money on the products before, we really tanked. We have that unregulated stock market. And so some people were making a really good really smart investments at different times. And it was just really helping them. So industrialists really believed it was unrestricted capitalism. There goes the bell, sorry. And unrestricted growth. So they continued to expand their facilities and flooded the market with the goods. At first, profits soared, but who made that money? thinking back to the very first slide where we talked about how businesses and factories were making like 79% more money than ever before. By 1920, though, there were more plants than needed, and the market was saturated with goods that few Americans could afford to buy. And so we have this 1%. Okay, we've heard that so many times before about that 1%, even more recent as well. By 1929, the Federal Trade Commission reported that 1% of the American population possessed over 59% of the country's wealth. So information for both overproduction and the last cause, unequal distribution of wealth. So if you will, in your packet, sorry, I'm speaking so fast. I don't need to be, but in your packet, if you turn to the last cause, the second last page is unequal distribution of wealth. This overlaps beautifully with this one. The overproduction kind of at the beginning, and what went into that, the rich becoming richer, is really complementing that overproduction of wealth. People started, so I'm going to just jump over to that one really quick here. Okay, so people started hoarding their money. So as the country is starting to struggle a little bit and the business leaders are seeing it, they're going to see it first. They're going to stop spending as much. So they're just keeping that money in their savings accounts at home and their business or whatever it is. And so money stops circulating. So if you look back at the spiral, one of the things along the downward trend is less money in circulation. This can happen for a variety of reasons we talked about, and one of them being is people stop spending money. I brought that to your attention on the very first day we did this, where you all had your jobs, like a mechanic or shoe sale or car furniture salesman. Is as you were seeing people around you lose their jobs, your instinct is going to be to stop spending as much. And that is really, really harmful. You want to keep things flowing so that there's more of a demand, so those people can find jobs in other industries or other jobs for it. Unequal distribution of wealth. Here's some facts as well. Really came from that trickle down economic plan. I just said that a couple of minutes ago as well. Is the government had really great intentions, and the businesses weren't doing anything illegal, or really, even one could argue they weren't even doing anything super sleazy or anything like that. They were doing what was right for their company at the time, and they weren't told that they couldn't do that. This really led to about 60% of the families in the US living below minimum substance level of $2,000 a year. Between 20 and 29, average Americans saw their net income increase 9%, while the rich saw it increase by 75%. So the rich were just becoming richer. Banks and businesses try to encourage consumer spending by allowing people to buy things on credit. Only got us in a deeper hole. Americans fell deeper and deeper in debt as they purchased items they couldn't afford and paid higher rate of interests. So the banking system, governments kind of finding ways to make money, although with good intentions. It's what happened is they made a lot of money, and the average person was left with scraps left over. All right, so I'm going to pause this one and create a second one so you can take a little break before I talk about farmers, which also goes with overproduction.